Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. This time, TNG, Force of Nature. Yeah, we're not talking about this show, but we could be. Force of Nature here on It's All Been Checked Before. Become a Force of Nature. Today's your last day to get in on our new tiers on our Patreon. Become a Patreon, patreon.com/IBD. We told you before, you get to see the video of us, you get to see our bonus episodes. Also, you got all the stuff from the Mothership. It's all been done radio hour. It is a bevy of great things. Some cool things out there in the tiers. Go check them out. And, you'll feel good in your heart for supporting us, and it's really easy to do, and it's not crazy money. But right now, this show is going to explain this force of nature on It's All Been Trekked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Stephen.
And Keith. And
me?
Yeah,
Megan.
For me. Yeah, for you.
Jimmy-Jerome, I said last week I'd let you put your name in as a regular host.
I forgot. It's been a week. I forgot.
It has been. I'm sorry.
What a week.
Perfect.
Too.
I should expect you to remember it for a whole week. We're here to talk the Next Generation episode, Forces of Nature. Or sorry, not forces, just singular. Force of Nature. First impressions.
Oh, it came a little strong for me. Like a tornado or hurricane, perhaps, or some other force to be reckoned with. That was
Or a cat.
Yes. Yeah.
Like Chloe. Yeah, I felt the same way, other than the spot, which Passion is So, my favorite Star Trek Tumblr, TNG Tumblr, it was like, Spot's the B story. I don't understand. I agree. Completely agree. And yeah, this was definitely one of those episodes, and to pull the curtain back, I ended up watching very, 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 very late last night. And so today I was like, man, do I remember everything in that episode? Because it seemed like there was just that element and Spot. It's like, no, that's pretty much what happened. I went back and read the Spot's description or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, it was not my favorite.
I felt like I was disappointed that we're stitle kind of talking about climate change. Even in the future.
It took me a while to get there. Sorry. I was going to say it took me a little while to figure out that's what they were going for, because I was distracted by another one of those like neurodivergent coding kind of things with the character they had. Once I was there, yeah, all right. I mean, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, Megan.
You didn't.
Oh.
It was a clunky commentary on the climate, but it did make me appreciate back when it was just trying to get people to make some self-sacrifices for the good of all, or bureaucracy slowing things down, instead of half the country having gone insane and just don't believe science anymore. So it was a simpler time, and it made me nostalgic for when half the country hasn't gone completely mad.
Yep.
But overall, a clunky, awkward episode. Keith is going to have to leave here very soon, so rather than go through the episode beat by beat, we will kind of do that after he leaves, but let's make sure he gets to talk about any major points he wants to talk about before he leaves. So what were the big things in this episode for you, Keith?
Well, first I'll say this probably was a good episode for me, but just like, I think we're going to say that it probably didn't come anywhere near like hanging any sort of astral body, let alone a moon. But yeah, so you had the overly abrasive scientific character again, and presented not too unrealistically, unfortunately, in some ways, although again, they were probably ahead of their time, not really understanding what they were portraying. But it did demonstrate very well the way that people who are passionate about certain kinds of causes and ideas can end up shooting themselves in the foot. The way they're portraying the person was very irrational, and not very irrational. I will say that excessively impatient to the point where they would lead them to do something like that. I feel like there was another way that could have been accomplished, but it's that being pushed over the edge sort of thing. They're unstable, and in some ways it kind of discredits. All right. For instance, Geordi, when he was explaining to Data why those problems were coming across, it was a nice, thoughtful thing they're expressing. I think a good way to try to reach the average person in the middle, in a way, trying to almost give them a way to feel better about themselves and say, well, yeah, give them like a face-saving way to reconsider their position, which is, I think, what a lot of people are sorely lacking, from all the divisiveness that's happened up to this point. But it also, a lot of people will probably seize on the other part of that, which is to say, yeah, you know what? I was right to be annoyed by that person. It's their own fault that this isn't going to happen because of that. and it kind of was punctuated by the sister's actions. You know, she's brilliant. She does all these things, and she ended up being right. They believe, you know, it's probably right, but it was all undercut by the extremity of what they were willing to do, or what they ended up doing, and the way that they met every sort of concession from the other side is like, oh, I knew it. You weren't going to do anything right now. Like we just said we need to read this and do something, and you know, that's like miles ahead of what progress they had made up to that point, but it was still just not enough. And so let's throw the baby out with the bathwater sort of thing. So anyway, so that would be my annoying character, obviously, the scientist who just, yeah, you never listen to me. I'm not listening to you. This isn't enough.
Dr. Sarova.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, Keith, I had written her down as annoying, and I'm changing my mind. As you spoke, I changed my mind because I did find her grating and hard to understand. But the more you talked about her, what she did, the more I'm like, you know what? She was just really desperate because nobody was doing the right thing. And it's ridiculous. She had to act so aggressively to even get attention for the issue. I don't blame her for that. I blame them for not listening to her. And you could argue that maybe she didn't need to sacrifice her life, but I'm on her side here. I mean, this issue needed attention. Nobody was listening. She was smart enough to figure it out when nobody else could, but they weren't even giving her a chance. That's just not fair. So I'm taking away her annoyance factor to myself. There's another obvious answer anyway, and defending her. And I'm going to be her defender because you've just your attack on her made me want to defend her. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's precisely it too. I mean, I would like to think that, who knows, maybe that is one of those reverse psychology things. Maybe that'll happen, or maybe that could be an effect of that. If people were able to think through things in that way, which, whatever. I will say that I'm probably somewhere closer to the middle on that idea. Certainly, it's just some of her objections in the moment seemed irrational. I was supporting the idea of the mines and so forth, of the mining. They were saying, putting those kinds of things up to a point too. I mean, it did seem a little too underhanded, and you know, that's probably a good allegory for seemingly extreme efforts of protesters in certain cases, certain kinds of picketing. These things weren't working, so we had to do this. We had to stop this traffic, and you could have stopped somebody from getting to the hospital with an ambulance, that kind of thing. There are all kinds of things that could have gone wrong. Even just the types of inconvenience they're causing just to get people's attention is still, I don't know. That's, you know, people have had that debate. They're still going to. But yeah, once you actually started having a conversation and you start attacking people who won't even, I mean, who are actually, we know from our perspective are usually pretty rational, thoughtful people, Picard especially, under the circumstances, was being, I think, pretty patient. He had to say what he had to say, but once they started getting down to, you know, the details, he was more than willing to try to push things through. But of course, she wouldn't be able to see that. I can understand that too. This is just some guy. You know, she hasn't been watching the show. She doesn't know who Picard is. So
she only saw the best of both worlds, and she's like, he just murdered all those people, so I don't trust him at all.
Yeah. So I actually talked myself into something there too, because I hadn't stopped to think that part. No, it's like,
as you were saying Picard, blah blah blah. I was like, then you made the argument I was about to make against you. So
yeah, so it's like Data. Who's this guy? Okay, whatever. Yeah. Well, sure, they're gonna look into it. They're gonna do the best they can. You know. So I see.
They sabotaged the Ferengi ship. Why didn't they just sabotage it to do what she ended up doing with the ship when she had
blow it up?
Yeah.
All good mad scientists, you have to do it yourself.
No, I think it would have to. Well, first of all, there would have to be the right. Well, apart from just the obvious answers, they would have needed to have somebody there to witness it in that way. I think for it to have proven anything, you'd have to have people who are proven to be scientifically capable and of measuring what has happened.
Sabotage 2 ships. One that forced to watch this other ship explode.
Well, you have to evacuate it first, though. She doesn't want to murder anybody.
That too.
Well, you have to keep some people on there to get killed, so the others will go tell everyone else. Yeah.
I think I don't think she would have gone as far as killing anybody other than herself. Like, she didn't mean to endanger that other ship.
I think it's the equivalent of injecting herself with her own serum. Like, I'm going to prove to you all.
Right. That this I don't think she would have blown up anybody's starship that they were on.
there's a lot of suicide on Star Trek.
It's kind of like the equivalent of the person that puts gasoline on their head and lights a
Mhm.
Right. I was thinking
Fire.
of the Tibetan monk.
yeah.
I'm just thinking of more like in the scientific ways of people that have
Right.
risked being excommunicated and done like
Mhm.
really weird things with corpses just to prove and to advance
Well, super
their
villains, you mean.
theories. Or, medical doctors.
Yeah, people
Yeah.
who
In the
turn
medieval
themselves into
times.
lizards and so forth.
Yeah, that's people.
Mm.
And we've had some of those guys on.
Somebody else saw Spider-Man this week. Any other points you want to talk about, Keith, before you have to leave?
I think it's been covered. I think it's all been done. All right, no, sorry, it's all been tracked at this point. Yes,
You want to tell us who you're going to have a drink with, real quick?
I would think the brother in this case.
Robble. Yeah.
Yeah. A very likable character. I was already thinking in frustration ahead to how these allegories are playing out in the present. Again, as far as civil rights protesting, you're going to have some people, the loudest voices pointing to this character as being respectability politics and so forth, and dismissing the importance of being able to relate to people in a certain way. But yes, I liked the character, like what they ended up doing with him. And he was, instrumental in what was happening there, and still had to put his grief aside as Picard, begged him to do. And he did. He was, I think probably the most helpful character in it.
Yeah, well, we start with Spot under the bed and items breaking. And apparently Geordi just borrowed him to see if he wanted to get a cat.
Mhm.
And then is so indignant that, how dare you not train this cat? It's not behaving. You should be able to let this cat behave, because my sister had a cat that always jumped into her arms because she put tuna in her blouse.
It jumped into her arms like a man because of the tuna in her blouse. So we got to wonder, what exactly was she training that cat for?
I'm sorry, did he say like a man?
Like a man.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's gross.
I didn't hear
Yep.
that.
Oh, yeah.
Classic Jordan.
And I noticed the only thing she trained the cat to do that he mentioned was jump into her arms, and there was food involved. So that's not really training a
She
cat.
put tuna in her blouse.
She just wanted her nipples nibbled on.
Exactly.
I think you might be mischaracterizing some of that in the sense that he was saying, well, first of all, condensing like 3 or 4 scenes into that. It's like a conditioning technique that I think is somewhat valid in the sense of it's sort of like treat training until the cat was able to do it eventually.
Yeah,
But still.
I don't think that Spot broke that vase though, because the vase was smashed and he would have just pushed it off of the
Very slowly.
Yeah, so I think that he's being framed, and that Geordi has a problem with Spot, like a personal problem.
I think Geordi, the dog lobby clearly played a hand in this episode.
Don't you mean a Paul, Stephen?
Yes. Yes, I do. I refuse to acknowledge that, Keith. I refuse to acknowledge.
No, that was awful.
But yeah, I think I mentioned this before, maybe on the Spot episode, but the science about cats being trainable and everything is really just being explored now. And most animal behaviorists and experts are saying cats are just as trainable as dogs. There's just not the history. They just haven't been studied because everyone's been paying attention to dogs all these years. So we really don't know. So
I just assume they were trainable. They just don't want to be trained.
Well, and that I kind of like that aspect about cats as well, but I also know they can be trained to some extent. And then Crusher,
Yeah, the actress that played Spot was wonderful.
I think Crusher says cats are inherently untrainable. I'm like, nonsense. And somebody else says they're lacking in intelligence. Nonsense also.
That is none.
Big nonsense. Mhm.
Yeah.
All right,
So
before I
the
go, I
dog
just wanted,
lobby,
sorry, want to weigh in on that for a second. Well, I think some of that is stereotypical as far as cats not wanting to, and some of that is temperamental. I mean, their dogs are, some dog breeds have certain kinds of instinctual drives, it seems, to do certain kinds of work. But just as an example of one of Marianne's cats that I recall, used to, for a while I thought she was trolling me because she would get up on the toilet and just keep hitting the lever, like playing with it, like she was trying to get it to flush, but it would rattle and kind of make an annoying noise until I went to get up and look, and she would run off. I think eventually what I figured out before I left was that I think that she was trying to signal that she wanted water.
Mm.
It was actually kind of clever. Just go check the water bowl kind of thing. So
They do train us.
Yeah.
It's really
They do.
actually the other way around.
They do. That's why they're smarter.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I must be off.
Mikey! The Foley artist for this episode was a little over-enthusiastic, because whenever it was banging around when Spot jumped out from under the bed at the end, there was nothing in Geordie's quarters that would make those noises.
Yeah.
Sorry, they're not as good as Megan over Foley artist of It's All Been Done Radio Hour.
The almost best. Not at all sort of way. Thank you for that.
You're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
As people will know if they're listening to It's All Been Done Radio Hour.
You better be listening.
So there's a ship that's got missing. It's the Fleming. Is that like the James Bond author in Fleming? Or is there a scientist Fleming?
Good question.
It's a medical ship. So that made me think it's probably not the James Bond author, but I couldn't tell you who else it would be named after. I'm on Memory Alpha, Memory Beta. It does not say who it's named after. Oh, Sir Alexander Fleming, a British human bacteriologist who discovered penicillin. That makes more sense.
All right.
So,
Been going with the scientists discovering things.
yeah, that makes absolute sense. So the Fleming's gone missing in this little corridor because apparently this area of space is hard to navigate. You can only go through this one area. There's lots of stuff interfering around, and it's gone missing. It's a medical ship. We need to go save it. So there's your start plot. And Geordie apparently has a rivalry with the chief engineer of the Fleming, so he wants to make sure his engines are better than everybody else, where Geordie's getting a little bit annoying. Like, I know they're the flagship and everything, and he's got pride being the chief engineer of the flagship, but it's kind of over the top. His, like, we got to push it another percentage so that we can be the best. Yeah,
I'm not hearing a lot of ambition coming out of you, mister.
I am not competitive, so if you're going to make it competitive, I'm out.
I am not competitive either.
Yeah, I'm not about to get into a competitive competition with anyone. I'm just done.
But I also kind of like the tying it into, like, there are people that they have these pasts with that they maybe went to school with, and you have these little friendly rivalries. I like that. It colors the rest of it or in a little bit, so it's kind of more fully fleshed out.
I did like the fact that Data was just continuing to. Actually, I thought it was funny the way, he was essentially just reflecting back towards Geordie, like how insane his response to the cat and the ship were like, oh, so you're saying this? Well, no, what I'm saying is this. Exactly. Yeah. It's just like, yeah, you're a crazy person.
The little crawl and talks were fun with Data and Geordie as they went through all the different exploration of what could be wrong.
Yeah.
So they don't find the Fleming. They come across instead the Ferengi ship. And we only see one person on the Ferengi ship, as is customary a lot of times on alien view screens to save budget. It's Damon Prack, played by Lee Ehrenberg, who we've seen before playing other characters, I think other Ferengi on this series. He's best known for like Once Upon a Time and the ABC television drama and Pirates of the Caribbean movie series. Fun actor. Yet another Ferengi he's brought to life in a delightful way. Oh, he's only played one other Ferengi in The Next Generation. And actually, that episode hasn't aired yet. So, never mind. He did play a character on DS9 in Season 1 in the previous Ferengi episodes. That must be what I'm thinking of, the Negus. He was in that one. Not last week's Ferengi episode, like a year ago's Ferengi episode. So, he's upset. He blames the Enterprise, but the Ferengi seems more afraid of his own government than he does of Picard, because Picard's like, well, fine, we'll just call it in. And he's like, no, never mind, I'll take your help. And I'm like, really? We've met Zek. Zek isn't that scary. Why are you all nervous about Picard calling it in? I don't get it.
That's a good question.
Unless he was just trying to bluff Picard to get Picard to repair his vessel, and then he realized he almost lost the bluff and had to like pull it back. I don't know.
That sounds,
a little more reasonable, because Zek's not scary. So, but yeah, the Enterprise is plenty willing to trade repairs for information. Not that he really has anything. When Geordie asks Data how the training's coming along, I love Data shaking his head no as he goes, I have not been or he's nodding his head yes, sorry, as he says, I have not been entirely successful. It was just really funny. And I like the shot of Spot training Data with the yarn.
Yeah.
So
doing a much better job training. My other favorite is Geordie. I cannot stun my cat.
That was a good line too. Yeah, I mean, I think this podcast is well established to be a cat-loving podcast. Yeah. So that's why I said when there was an obvious alternate annoyance besides the sister, obviously Geordi from these scenes, which we'll talk about later. But
Makes me
anybody
sad.
that wants to hate on cats is going to annoy me. So
Yeah.
now, if they were hating on dogs, I wouldn't care too much. But so then the Enterprise finds a probe. It knocks out all of their systems, and 2 people beam to engineering. Don't you think they should beam to the bridge? Wouldn't that make more sense?
Yeah.
But I appreciate. Well, I guess maybe they thought there's phasers on the bridge and not phasers in engineering. I don't know.
Less security. I don't know.
You'd think engineering would be heavily shielded and secured. In fact, there should be transporter inhibitors all around engineering.
It should
if
be.
you ask me.
That's a physical security fail. It's a problem.
I think in the future, maybe Starfleet will fix that when they add seatbelts to the ship. They should add that as well.
I mean, the lack of security in engineering is just.
I mean, they did. That was one of the things. What was the scientist, the brother's name? Because I kept calling them the Algorians because they look like
nice.
a species of Al Gores.
Yeah.
Dr. Rabble.
Okay, so Dr. Rabble, they just were like, yeah, sure, here, access to the ship, type in whatever. Oh, and she had it too. And I was like, wow, they just let them do whatever.
That's been a well-established Star Trek fact. Way back in the Kirk Enterprise, they let Khan look up all the records on the ship schematics. That's why he was able to take over the ship. And 100 years later, they haven't got security any tighter. So
it just baffled me from a cybersecurity
policy does not pay off. It just does not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we see where it doesn't work on the TV show, but maybe 99.9% of the time it's fine. So they're not going to change it for the 0.01% of the time. So the woman scientist, 2 scientists, the woman scientist is named Dr. Sarova. She's played by Margaret Reed, best known for Only Murders in the Building, 1 episode, sadly. Dear Edward, FBI Most Wanted, and Law & Order Special Victims Unit, they're all guest spots. She has 61 credits, but it doesn't look like she's still active, but she has not gone beyond guest spots here in her career. So she comes on and she's like, "You're killing us," and she's very intense and for good reason, because she has been obviously fighting this battle for a long time. Nobody's listening to her, and her planet is being destroyed. So I get she's passionate for all the best reasons. She probably made a documentary called An Inconvenient Truth like a decade ago, and nobody's done anything about it. So
that sounds about right. Yes.
I did read
she lost the presidency to some idiot whose cousin on Fox News called it for him, and then got the Supreme Court to stop counting votes. Now she's stuck.
A cartoon made, really embarrassing cartoon that pretty much is how everybody thinks you are.
And then she guest starred on a sitcom where she heard whales and ran off to save them. It's 30 Rock.
The writers did write this based on the ozone layer issues in the early 90s. And I don't know. Actually, I do know it's part of the conversation then, but it struck me that these guys are kind of like in the way they want to get notified, but also the thing that you noted, Jimmy, that there's only one way to get through this place, and it goes by their sector or their planet or whatever. And nobody, all these ships coming through don't care if they drop off and that's very like third world, which we obviously are still doing here, where it's like, we'll let those guys do the mining and all. And they even have the conversation about, I think it's at the end too, about, well, we could do it, but are we sure the Romulans are going to do it? Then why should we be doing it?
See that? Yeah.
That argument still comes up, so there are some, as much as this was on the nose and everything, in some aspects, it's like, yeah, that's not a bad job of futurizing it.
Yeah, because the warp drive is like fossil fuel usage.
Yeah.
It's just, I get what you're doing.
It was a bit clunky in the way it was presented, but there were some good grains in here. I mean, in the whole presentation of they tied it to Picard and Geordi and Starfleet's identity of traveling the stars, and now their identity is being threatened. I mean, America's a car culture, and people don't want to give up their gas guzzlers. So here we actually have, and I know when this episode was made, we didn't really have an alternative, but now we have electric cars. We have an alternative. And they're trying to force science to come up with an alternative because you can't just keep destroying things. And the knee-jerk reaction is bad, but Geordi and Picard are wise enough to not do the knee-jerk reaction, to actually consider it, unlike these other people who, as I mentioned, have gone insane and decided to just deny science at all costs rather than...
Speaking of which, I think Picard says it's part of their job to keep an open mind. So I wish that was part of more people's jobs.
I mean, I think that is the job description of like members of Congress. They just don't do it.
Right.
I would think, anyway. Good members of Congress. Maybe that's the informal job description, but still. So the scientist, Dr. Rabble and Dr. Serova. Dr. Rabble is played by Michael Corbett, the brother of the brother-sister, who's best known for, it looks like, mostly additional crew credits on the Hunger Games, 50 Shades of Grey, Sex Tape, and then he was a voice of a movie zombie in the animated film Paranorman. So not a lot of acting. I guess he has 30 acting credits, but he also has like sound department and producer credits as well, interestingly enough. But yeah, he's the quote unquote more reasonable one, because he's like, they're like, okay, shut down your minds and we're going to look into it. And he's like, sure. And she's like, no. And at that point, I will say that maybe that was the one time I thought she was a little unreasonable. Like, hey, you got them to look into it, shut down the minds. But then on the other hand, if she shuts down the minds, what leverage does that give her to keep pushing the issue? So I again, now I'm talking myself out of even criticizing her for that. So I'm so frustrated with reality and people not listening to smart scientists like Dr. Serova.
Yeah. Dr. Rabble was just not as passionate because he wasn't as involved for as long. He even admitted, I didn't believe her at first either.
And wasn't as intelligent as her. Like, clearly she was a super genius that nobody else had been able to figure it out. They said, well, he said it took him 2 years of study to even understand what she was saying. So that's...
You can imagine how frustrating that is, you know?
Absolutely. And the fact that nobody would listen to her just because she's a woman scientist. Thankfully, that didn't come into play in this. But that's kind of the stereotype that you almost get, where if they'd reverse the two characters, you're almost playing into the stereotype of just not listening to women in certain...
Yeah, I always got that it was they weren't listening because they just, you know, that was their 12 light years of space. They had to pass through to get through that space. So that's why they weren't listening, because they really just, this is how else are we going to do it?
Right. Warp drive. And they've been using it, like they make the point, they've been using warp drive for 300 years. They haven't seen any issue. But I think that the corridor is the answer to that question, because the rest of space doesn't have starships traveling through it like the same spot of space all the time. Yeah. And then if every starship in this sector has to go through this one spot, then obviously it's going to exacerbate problems that would be elsewhere. Right. Like eventually the problem will come out everywhere. It just starts where it's concentrated. That makes sense.
Jimmy, I think this is my new alternate episode, which is based on you saying that, you know, he had to study it for a couple of years to understand it. I just want a montage of him like reading and looking through a microscope and looking at, you know, charts and graphs. And then he's like, so what you're saying is it's a narrow area where all these ships come through, and that warp drive is killing us. Yeah. All right. I agree with you now.
It does seem really simple when you say it.
I forgot there'd be calendar months going by.
Well, and I think they make the point that they don't actually see the damage from the warp engines. It's more of a theory that there's some bad things happening to the planet, but they haven't really connected it. Yeah, and she's the only one that's made the connection. Yeah.
How can there be a hole in the ozone layer? I can't even see it. Yeah. That hole, not all that nonsense. Yeah.
So the brother, Dr. Rabble, actually seems grateful for the help. He's the quote-unquote reasonable one. And I think it's probably good she brought him along, because I think she's wise enough to realize she needs a calmer voice talking to people to be heard. So I give her credit for that, too, because maybe he was insistent, but maybe she just understood her own failings, even if she couldn't bother to keep her mouth shut, which is a failing I have, too. So I can't get upset with her for that either. If I think I'm right, They had us a really cool special effect with the purple subspace rift and everything. I liked the look of that a lot. I don't know if that was just like my Blu-ray upgrade or if that was how it was, but it looked neat.
Yeah, and I like the graphic presentation of it, actually. Helped me understand a lot better. I guess I'm like Rabble. It took me a little while.
I will say, while that looked cool, the rest of this episode really felt like they had a shoestring budget. Maybe they're saving it all for the series finale, because I know that's a big extravaganza. But the fact that we keep hearing about the Fleming, and not only do we not see the crew who are rescued end up on the Enterprise, but we never even see the ship in an exterior shot. That really stood out to me, that they just avoid it. We're just going to talk about it. We don't have any budget to show you anything.
And the Elasians' makeup look wasn't great. And
I liked their makeup look. I thought the costume was kind of weird. And
maybe,
they just look like Al Gore. Is like this is the entire planet of people that were like Al Gore.
But then the facelift, and I really like the little like spirally gold things that went into their hair on the sides.
Kind of like synapses. And,
yes, like external synapses.
And then you had the little ruching on the suit.
The suit was weird because it was mostly normal, but there were like extra ruffles in places that you didn't expect ruffles to be.
Maybe, I don't know, is it supposed to be Elizabethan in nature?
A little bit. Yeah, that was my only fashion note, was I kind of dug the makeup job on them.
Yeah. The Fashion and So people said, I wanted to make it more jazzy, but all I had was gray fabric. So that was their summation.
I mean, the rest of the planet actually dresses better, but they're scientists, so you know.
Yeah, they're scientists.
Yeah.
So
it said, basically, this is a giant jersey blazer that's just pajamas masquerading as clothes, aka the best kind of clothes.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
I mean, they didn't look like lab coats or any version of lab coats.
They look like business suit.
Yeah.
My business ruffles.
So Dana comes up with a plan that we're just going to kind of coast through and beam out the Fleming crew, which is pretty smart, and I liked it. We get a scene where Geordi just feels super guilty about not listening to Dr. Sarova after she blows herself up. And I wasn't talking about her blowing herself up because we kind of discussed that with Keith earlier, but the guilt, I mean, I really liked that Dr. Rabble is emotionally mature enough not to blame Geordi, even though he has every reason to blame Geordi, even though logically it's not Geordi's fault. Like, he's really evolved, this brother. I guess he understands because he's been around his sister long enough to be like, okay, I get it, dude. But still, I kind of like that we had the moment of guilt, even if it felt heavy-handed. And I really liked the emotional intelligence of the brother not blaming him.
Yeah, I like Geordi's epiphany there. Yeah, I thought that was a good scene.
I didn't love Geordi in this episode at all, but the guilt scene was okay.
That was a good moment, yes.
I was really frustrated and tense when they're like, we're going to save them. No, wait, the Fleming's turning this thing on and we have no way to call them. And it's
okay.
Oh my God, it was completely realistic, but so frustrating.
But they were close enough to beam them off of the ship, and they weren't close enough to communicate with them.
The communicators weren't working. The Fleming was still super damaged. But they
communicated with the Ferengi by diverting the whatever spaced radio signals into the staticky thing that they probably, explained better on the TV show.
But I think they had time, and there also wasn't a giant anomaly in the way.
Okay.
That part didn't bother me, but
well, now I understand it.
So the conclusion to this, after Geordi manages to surf the wave, and they all figure out a way to escape, and they rescue the whole Fleming.
I think he was drifting the rift. Okay.
Yeah.
He was drifting the rift, and there was a really great space PowerPoint presentation that you forgot to mention.
It was wonderful. I liked the graphic. I understood it.
Wonderful.
Didn't you feel like, though, we needed one scene of Geordi and his rival chief engineer?
I was disappointed to not see him maybe eat some crow a little bit. He was a little braggy. He was a little braggy.
I would have loved it to that end. I'm just coming along on it. If the other engineer from the Fleming came in with his cat, petting it.
And it's very well trained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There you go. That would have been awesome. That would have been so good.
Yeah, that is great.
His cat has either a device around its neck that it can talk in very well spoken English, or it can program something.
His cat's just Goose from the MCU. So the conclusion of this is they're going to set a warp 5 speed limit except in emergencies, which makes sense because you still need to go faster in emergencies. Sure. And the Klingons will probably observe it because they're really good buddies at this point. But yeah, they're enemies, the Romulans, Cardassians. Of course, you have to name drop Cardassians because DS9's a thing now. So you gotta keep bringing up those Cardassians. And of course, the Borg are going to observe it, but they don't even name check them. I guess they use the transwarp coordinates. They do transwarp corridors. They do a different thing. But yeah, it's you're right. That whole allegory of planets and. But I like that Starfleet is just because they won't do it doesn't mean we won't try.
Right.
I like that even the Klingons have an understanding of how important sustainable living is. They're not the Klingons barbaric.
The Klingons went through that giant disaster 100 years ago where they overmined Praxis, their moon. That was Star Trek 6: The Undiscovered Country, and they already lost their moon to an environmental disaster that almost killed their planet. So I think the Klingons have learned their lesson by doing it already.
Yeah.
They know that it's the honorable thing to do.
They're probably more sensitive to environmental disaster than most races at this point.
Definitely cannot judge a book by its cover.
Or love the Klingons. We're gonna get so much Klingon development in Deep Space Nine. I just can't wait. So much. Picard talks about damage the thing I hold most dear. Yeah, that Picard and Geordi coming to terms with that it's like hurting part of their identity. But Geordi saying we still have time to make it better, which we did in the 90s, and
We
now
did.
and now all we can do is try to mitigate the damage because that ship of actually preventing it has sailed.
Some
Florida will cease to exist soon enough, one way or another. Thank God. I mean, it could have happened to a better state. Just saying. All complaints can be sent to Keith at IVDpresents.com. He left, but I will still blame him. My big question at the end was they always make an effort to tie the A plot to the B plot. So was there a very ham-fisted metaphor here that Spot was just behaving as nature intended, and so are humans? With Spot wasn't worrying about the consequences, just like humans using the warp drive for it. Like, they didn't really tie that, but I feel like there's something there that
It could have been the nature of the cat and the android adapting to the nature of the cat instead of the cat adapting to the nature of the android.
Something there, yeah.
Killing the
They just
canary
didn't
in the
make it
coal mine. The cat killing the canary in the coal mine. Yeah.
My alternate episode, though, would be to make Spot the A plot and this other thing the B plot, because I just want more Spot.
I completely agree. Mine was a depressing one. Warp change deniers. Yeah, I'm sure that they'll be out soon.
I feel like the makers of Star Trek Discovery watched this episode, and that was their premise for a couple seasons ago when we can't use warp drive anymore for a whole season because of the disaster.
Yeah.
That's all the notes I got. What about you two?
I just have one fashion note. Crusher's hair. So multifaceted. So many different looks. This
I
one
don't
was a little
remember her
different.
being in this episode.
I couldn't really put a good handle on it, but yeah, she was there.
Okay.
So that's my only other note. Yeah, literally lather, rinse, repeat. It's Crusher's hair every week. But yeah, that's all I got.
Geordi used the word slouch. Pretty not futuristic colloquialism.
That's true.
I do like. I like the idea of slouch survive.
Yeah, it's a good
Good word.
one. I'm no slouch.
Yeah.
I like it.
Don't sell yourself short. You're a tremendous slouch.
It's true. Lazy in space.
This episode was written by Naren Shankar, one of our regulars. The director was Robert Letterman, who directed one previous episode of Next Generation called I, Borg, but he's mainly an editor. He edited 33 episodes of Next Gen, 17 DS9, 44 Voyager, 34 Enterprise. But he has these 2 directing credits and 3 writing credits for 2 DS9 episodes and a Voyager episode. We haven't seen him yet. So interesting to me that this editor has branched out to a little bit of directing, a little bit of writing with Trek.
I think he meant Roman numeral 1 Borg. I'm still holding on.
I love that episode, but yeah. I'm just mad they didn't have the comma in there.
Yeah.
I still put the comma in there in my head. Ranking the episode, who was your annoyance?
I think you guys brought me around. I had Sarova. I think I came around to it's Geordi. I mean, his so out with his cat hatred that, or ignorance, whatever term you want to use. It's Geordi.
Yeah, Geordi, for sure. Same reason.
Yeah. We're all Geordi except Keith still had Sarova. He left before we could bully him into changing his answer. Next time. Who are we having a drink with?
This will be no surprise because I think every episode they're in, that's who I have a drink with. It's Spot.
Spot.
Yeah.
I want to have a drink with Spot, but in like the tube, what are they called? The Jerry tubes or
The Jeffries tube?
Jeffries tubes. Yeah, Jeffrey tube.
Yeah, that's
Jeffrey
a
tubes.
great idea.
Yes, Jerry's tubes. That's
named
so
after
different.
set designer Matt Jeffries, who designed the original Enterprise.
So I want to be in the tubes, like crawling through and having a conversation while we're.
That makes sense.
Maybe with one of those crazy straws from the future.
Nice. I'm going with Keith Rabble. I liked Rabble. I thought I wish we saw a little bit more of him being upset about his sister, but at the same time, it's like we saw him staring into space, so he was clearly grief stricken. But at the same time, he probably also figured this is just how it had to end. He probably knew this was coming for a long time, so I feel bad for him, but also he seemed like a good guy, and he's going to need a drink after losing his sister, so I'm going to have a drink with him.
I wonder if there's an MC Escher version of the Jeffries tube out there. Megan talking about them going around and having the cat there. Like, I just love the idea of Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a little hamster trail, like a habit trail,
Yeah.
habit trail.
Yeah.
I mean, despite Rule 34, I cannot find one by Googling MC Escher Jeffries tubes. I see pictures of Jeffries tubes. I see pictures of MC Escher stuff. I don't see them combined.
Or you have to get a local artist to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Why has nobody done that yet? Huh.
So I did look up the different decks that were damaged during this episode. I found a nice schematic online. Hopefully it was right. It was Memory Alpha.
That's the official canon encyclopedia.
Okay. So I'm learning how to
10 through
Google
14?
things. Deck 5, Deck 7, Deck 6, and Deck 14. I don't know how
they mentioned 10.
I might have missed that one.
Okay.
But I don't know how they missed Deck 6 if they got 5 and 7.
But just where it hit.
Yeah, because 6 and 14 are so far away.
Right.
But
no, I swore they had said 10 through 14 at some point, and that bumped me because 10 forward's obviously on deck 10. So when deck 10 gets damaged, I get worried about 10 forward, and that bar better be okay. And Guinan, of course, better be okay.
Yeah, she's fine. But deck 5 is an interrogation and detention center.
Yeah, that's fine. They never have anybody in those cells anyway.
We don't talk about that.
So, yeah, ranking the episode. Let's just go against our last next gen episode. Better or worse than Attached?
Lower.
Yeah. I don't know why I hesitated for so long.
It was so heavy-handed. It was
there is an MC Escher inspired Spock piece of art out there.
Nice.
So
below Attached is the interface.
Ooh.
Yeah, I would go above that. That was such a bad episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'm agreeing.
I didn't think that coming in, but I also forgot about that episode. So yes,
that episode's awful.
It's above that.
Anyway, next week, Necessary Evil. It's an episode of Deep Space Nine where Odo relives some terrible and tragic memories of a past investigation when he was the constable on Cardassian-occupied Deep Space Nine, then named Tarek Nor. So you've been waiting for it. We finally get flashbacks to when Deep Space Nine was Tarek Nor, the Cardassian ground station.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that'll be exciting. That'll be fun. Odo and Quark served there, and I think maybe Kira passed through there at some point, but obviously the Starfleeters aren't there.
So it's like a Deep Space Nine, Dawson's Creek. It's high school. And those guys were in high school.
I mean, work, labor camp, high school, same thing, right?
Yeah.
Depending on your high school, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, junior high for everybody was like a labor camp.
Well, the captain of Tarek Nor was Gul Dukat, so he'll be back.
Okay. Well,
until then, live long.
Unless you're truly willing to die for your cause and prosper.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?